This past couple of days, I've been doing a lot of traveling, and one of the things with traveling is that I'm just constantly eating outside. Um, and I met someone who, while I was speaking with them, told me all of these things that they thought that I was. Granted, I was just some random stranger sitting by myself at the bar, just trying to have some dinner. But what I've realized is that they have reduced me to this idea that they had about me. And granted, when I sit at the bar eating by myself, I'm typically reading a book. But that inspired me for today's topic, which is the problem of reduction, because I honestly thought about this a lot when I started interacting with people after the encounter that I had with that individual. So today's topic is reduction. Specifically with reduction, one of the things I wanted for us to kind of explore and focus on is how I think it's really hard to give a full explanation of someone when we reduce them to like a specific layer in application of layered existentialism, and how one single explanation doesn't necessarily do a good job at explaining an entire person, right? We're just, it's almost like we're summarizing them, but even in summary, we don't know the whole story, or we don't even know the whole movie. But realistically, right, the foundation of it all is that we're all humans, and we're messy, and we're flawed, and we are very complex. So with reduction, from that interaction with that person at the bar, and maybe you have experienced it too. Maybe you go somewhere and you look at someone and then you create and draw a conclusion about them in your head, whether that might be true or not. The other one that I always think about is the internet. Because of my current push in getting layered existentialism out there, one of the things I've been doing is interacting with honestly a lot of cool people on the internet. Which, to be quite honest with you, I never thought that I would be that person that would go on the internet and have conversations with stranger, but I guess just just never say never. But I've had a lot of wonderful conversations with people on the internet, and some of the conversations that it would start off is that they would give me some of their thoughts and ideas, and a lot of the times what we can perhaps recognize is that it's typically a one-sided relationship until there's engagement from the other side. So for example, sometimes they would reach out to me and I would respond to them, and so it ends up becoming like a to and fro conversation. Or sometimes I would respond to someone's video. Maybe it's because the topics I've been posting or that I've been discussing, now my algorithm is like a lot of individuals that are in a place in their life that it's almost like, I wouldn't say limbo, but it's almost like limbo, that a lot of the videos, they're honestly quite lonely, or they feel like they might be too self-aware living in the modern society. But what I notice is with that interaction, it's typically one-sided, because even if I were to put a comment on their page, it's typically like, you can do it, like, we can do it, you know, some words of positivity or whatever it might be. And without a response, and sometimes it could just be like a thumbs up or a heart or whatever, but even then, that's still a one-sided relationship that someone can have on the internet. But all I'm to say about that is, even I can be prone to reducing. Because what does reducing do for us? When we reduce, it helps our mind categorize things. And to be able to categorize things, we are able to reduce uncertainty, right? It's much easier to be like, oh, well, this person wears pink, so she must really like pink, or he must really like pink, right? That must be their favorite color. That's reducing them to the surface layer of things that we can see. For example, I happen to be quite allergic to apples. I mean, honestly, if anyone was trying to harm me, you can just feed me an apple and I probably would not do well. But another reduction is, hey, if anything has apples in it, I'm not going to eat it, right? That's a very elementary example. But we reduce because it just helps our mind categorize a lot easier. It saves a lot more energy. But one of the problems, in my opinion, when we reduce people is that we don't give them the opportunity to explain their entire dynamical system of who and how they are as a person. Because going back into the internet idea, it's typically whatever that I see is the information that they're putting out, but I still don't know them, right? I don't know what they're like at home. I don't know what their personality is like. I don't know how they deal with obstacles in life. I don't know what they love, and I don't know them as a person, right? And so when I'm thinking about reduction and how it doesn't really capture a person, it just gives a little snippet, why this might not be the best way of understanding someone, right? I think it's much easier for us to be like, well, they're just being lazy, or they're just being insecure, or whatever quick shortcuts that we can give them, but that really might not paint the entire picture. I'm gonna pull my chair here. So if we continue with that thought process really quick with the whole insecurity and anxiety, for example, if we just describe someone based off of their behaviors, if behavior is the only thing that we are focused on because that's the thing that we can see. Remember, in layered existentialism, this is layer 1, this is the autopilot, this is the surface things, this is the habits. These are the things as an outsider that we can see about them. If we were to reduce them in this entire layer, that means that we have forgotten about their nervous system. We've forgotten how they perceive the world, and they narrate and create meaning in their world, and how their coherence is. But that's something that we can't know, right? Because we're not that person. But to me, I think it's important to be cognizant that that could be some of the underlying things. So even if someone is anxious all the time, one of the questions I might be asking is what is their nervous system like? I know before people were like, Tammy, do you think I'm actually going to go to every single person and analyze and evaluate them when all you've been saying is that our mind wants to conserve energy? The answer is no. But I think a lot of the times if we were to have just a one-on-one conversation and we're actually engaged in having the conversation with them, because let's get real, sometimes we're not engaged in a conversation. I would consider myself a pretty good listener, but sometimes I'm I have too much stuff on my plate. Sometimes I might not even be listening to you because I'm just thinking about all the other things that I have to do, and so I am human, and that unfortunately does come with part of it. But when we are really engaged with someone, maybe those are some of the things that we can think about before we say, oh, you're just a lazy, whatever. So let's say if it's not simply just behavior that we are focusing on, let's say the next thing that we might be looking at is, what if we just did a biology explanation? What if we just did a biology explanation, that's just their nervous system. That's just their nervous system. They can't do anything about it, which there's a lot of studies that shows that that's not the case. What if that perhaps is the only explanation, is that we say that everything about this person is just about their nervous system? even if we did that, we're still neglecting other parts of the person, and that's the narrative. Like, what are the things that they're saying to themselves? What are the specific meaning, and even the weight, right? I think the discussion of weight about something is incredibly important as well. So, for example, do I even have an example? For example, I like to use my words very carefully sometimes. Not all of the times, but when I'm having a serious discussion, I like to be very precise with my words, because to me, I put a lot of meaning behind the weight of words. This is why, for example, when I always admire people who can constantly just be like, I love you, and I love you all, and just throw the word love around so freely. I cannot do that because I put so much weight on the word love. And as you can tell from that example, myself as someone that holds a lot of weight to the word love versus someone that's just so freely sharing the word love, we have different definitions. And well, it's not different definitions perhaps, but the different weight that we feel about the word of love. I don't know, maybe that tells a little bit more on how guarded I am about the word love, and maybe some people are just like, woo. And honestly, I think we kind of need both people on this planet. Maybe I'm defending myself. I kind of am, but I'm not, honestly. I think it's quite wonderful. So transitioning from that, what if we just went with the narrative explanation? What if we just went with the narrative explanation? So if we just go with only the narrative explanation, that denies a lot of the basic grounding of being a person. So what does that mean? Pretty much most of the thing that starts off in your body is due to your nervous system, right? For example, if you were cooking something and your hand touches something hot, your body immediately jolts back, or for the most part, it should jolt back, because it's like, ouch, danger. It's not a put your hand on the stove and then your brain goes, or your mind goes, oh, this is kind of hot. I need to move my hand back before I burn my entire fingers off, right? And so a lot of it comes from the nervous system. So it is important, in my opinion, to acknowledge too that in addition to the narrative that they have, also the nervous system. One of the other things that I wanted to bring up, because, and I think about this sometimes, is I think a lot of the times culture gets brought up. I almost misspelled culture. It's a mix of cursive and just regular writing. I think about culture a lot sometimes because as someone that grew up with several cultures in my home, if we blame someone entirely on their culture, and again, a lot of the times culture is constructed, right? I didn't come into this world and was like, oh yeah, I'm just Chinese. I just, that is not something I was born into the world with, but I was born into the world with a nervous system, for example. But all in all, to say is that we all have such a complex system to work with. So as much as we want to be like, yeah, well, I don't really understand, why they do this. It's probably because X, Y, and Z. Perhaps that's our own mind filling in the gaps and closing that loop. I think I've mentioned this before, but how our mind just loves to close the gap, because the more open loops we have in our mind, the more uncertainty there is. And sometimes I think it's really funny and absurd that as humans, we like to often have closed loops for that certainty. However, we live in a life where it is very much uncertain. and I just laugh to myself on how just paradoxical or contraindicative that life is. So honestly, to me, this is why we can't, like, we as a human organism, as a human system, and honestly as just a human, can't be reduced to just one layer. Or mine is definitely probably going to try to. Even myself, I do put a lot of focus and emphasis on not trying to reduce people into layers, but get my nervous system depleted enough with just life happening, and I'm just not going to talk to people because that's just me. When my nervous system is shot, I am also nowhere to be seen around people. But it's also important to acknowledge that, hey, there might be a little bit more to this person. Let me figure this out. Because even my example on for a person with anxiety or a person that is insecure, what was it that happened to them, in their nervous system through the time that they've collected while being alive? What is the narrative and the things that they're saying to themselves? What are some of the habits that they're doing? And what in its entirety is it providing continuity? I didn't mention this earlier, but this oftentimes the system wants to be in a form of continuity, because without that, we're going to fall apart. Because if there's nothing that we can grab onto, how uncertain is that for the human organism? I think a lot of people cannot be in that space before they go into like collapse coherence, and they start destabilizing further and perhaps fragmenting and start thinking whether life is meaningless or not, and go into nihilism, and then so we start spiraling through all of that. But the point is that we're very much dynamical, and we can go either which way, right? We can go for the so-called better and to put in micro emotions and micro actions to improve our habits, to improve ourselves as a whole, whatever that looks like. Or we can cope and control as best as we can with a lot of different things in life, and then go to the opposite side. There are times that I think to myself too, okay, let me think out loud here. There are times that I think that reduction is useful. I previously had a video where I discussed about insight and capacity, where someone can have all of the insight in the world. So for example, someone that has gone to therapy for a long period of time, but they still feel like they're not getting any better. And that's a capacity thing, right? That can be a capacity thing. Perhaps they've been in therapy for so long, but their nervous system has not been stretched enough and to be built on resiliency, that no matter how much they can know, their nervous system is still not catching up. Because the nervous system, so the capacity and the insight, don't go at the same speed. But where is this useful? So where I think it's useful to reduce someone to a layer is if someone is trying to work on themselves and they're trying to identify what it is that they can work on. So for example, if someone has been in therapy for a very long period of time, but they're like, hey, I'm not getting any better, or I don't think I need to be where I want to be, then perhaps doing a visit on their nervous system might be good, right? It might be good to be like, okay, what are some of the patterns that I do very frequently? I'm aware enough of it. I need to intercept that pattern wherever it is. So to break it down layer by layer, I think can be good if we are able to identify parts of ourselves that need some additional attention. To me, I think it's very similar. Like if I don't know, had a heart problem, I'm going to go see a cardiologist. I'm probably not going to go see a dermatologist, right? It's just, there's different specialties for different subgroups. Where I think that reduction, another thing with reduction is that it does help create certainty. And with certainty, again, a lot of times we want that certainty because we want to know what the next thing might be. Like, where is the next danger, right? Our mind is constantly scanning for threats. We are predicting, we are a prediction machine, and we are a pattern recognizing machine, and we try to predict like what might happen next, again, to avoid any dangers or threat. One of the things that, even though we should not necessarily reduce someone to a layer, no matter what the explanation is, it is very important that we take accountability for ourselves, right? Yes, I can go around and be like, hey, I've had spoken with this person and their nervous system, or that their narrative that they've been having has not been serving them how they wanted to serve themselves. I can provide that verbal for them, perhaps to make myself feel better about this person, but that still doesn't negate accountability on both ends, right? I don't think that we can ever really change or control people, right? If there's anything that we can really do, is that we can influence and inspire, or even not inspire other people, because oftentimes what happens is that we're a mirror of each other. Even myself sitting here right now speaking with you, this is a one-sided relationship, right? I don't have a specific person in mind when I am thinking out loud and sharing some ideas for us to explore about right now is reduction. But this is a one-sided relationship, and whatever you're feeling in your body right now are the things that are going on in your life. These are all individual basis. I cannot, as mentioned earlier, I can't feel what the other person is feeling, especially if I haven't spoken with them, right? So, especially on the internet, right? Whenever I go on X, someone's always fighting. And this is why I'm like, X is probably, I go on it, but also if I'm in a really bad headspace, I'm not going on X, because I know someone is fighting for whatever reason. But at the end of the day, when you go onto apps such as X, in my opinion, it's a one-sided relationship, and it's based off of the friction that someone believes about their worldview, perspective, subjective biases and perspective. And B, even if the other person responds, there's still a lag time. It's not a real FaceTime where we're having a back and forth conversation. And so to me, going back to accountability, it's really, really important, right? We can control ourselves. No matter what I say to you, no matter what someone else says to you, the best we can do, it's not even the best, right? But what we can truly do is to influence one another. But it's really up to ourselves to make that change, or to make that control. And it really depends on where you might be in life. If you look at your life right now, if you're like, hey, I'm actually pretty content, honestly, hats off to you that you've made it this far through the video. I think sometimes the videos and the people that comments to me, it seems like they were trying to, this has been a topic that they have visited before in their life, or perhaps that they're going through right now. But most people, if their life is hunky-dory, they're not going to be watching my video. So if you have watched my video so far, I honestly hope that you're doing okay. If you're trying to figure something out, just keep exploring with me, right? This is really, to me, the purpose of life. It's the discovery, it's the joy, it's to hear other people's perspectives and opinions. And if somewhere really does provide friction for me, I need to analyze like why, and vice versa, to be honest with you. And we're all biased to a certain degree. As I've mentioned earlier, because I do a lot of this type of thinking and work, this is pretty much my viewpoints and perspective about life, is that as humans, we are a very dynamical and complex systems. And for me to go around and be like, yeah, they're just X, so they must be Y, really doesn't land very naturally for me. But I know that I have my own biases too, and that I can also reduce people. And I'm here to take accountability and to be responsible, right? A lot of the times it's more like, oh, they like watermelon slushy, so they must like the flavor of watermelon. To me, that's pretty harmless. But if I were to be like, well, I don't even have an analogy, right? I'll use this one. Oh, they're this side of the politics, so they must be whatever. That's very hard for me. I don't. I know that that's such a hot topic right now. But at the end of the day, we're just all humans. We all just want to survive, and we all want to find continuity for our life, whatever that might seem like. But share with me your thoughts, what you think about reduction, if this is something that you've noticed yourself doing. Right, at the end of the day, the mind just wants as much simplicity as possible. I think one of the individuals I have spoken with that have reached out to me was talking about reduction as in the amount of stuff that I put in my video and how reduction might be key. And it was nice to hear that that was something that I was like, I'm going to constantly be working on it, since my mind works at like 500 miles per hour on any given day. But reduction's not necessarily all bad. But it's also not a tell-all explanation when it comes to another human. And sometimes it is, honestly, to me, so fun to just learn about another person. It's like reading a book, but they're talking to me, or they're texting me, or they're emailing me. And I hope that you'll find some other walking books that you can find joy in learning about them, as well as yourself too. Thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing you next time.